Okay, everything is on the go. Let's get started with tonight's work so that we can see what we all need to do. I've got a lot of slides to go through. Tonight's session is not that much of an interactive session, more so with me just sharing, trying to get through things as quickly as what we can. Some of the slides you'll see I'll go through quite fast. It's just a recap of what we've previously covered. So what we're going to look at, I'm going to start just going through your roadmap to tell you where you all should be at this week. We're going to just touch on the ICE tasks again, since so many students keep on asking questions about it. We're going to go through a summary of Learning Unit 2, and then we're going to discuss the key elements of Assignment 1. So just to show you, this is week 5 that we are currently in, so everybody should be finishing Learning Unit 2 this week, and by next week there's no work plan specifically for it, so that you can work on your assignment since that's when it's due. Let's quickly recap what our ICE tasks all entail. So ICE task 1 is activity 131. The suggested due date was the 10th. If you haven't done it, it's not the end of the world. I am marking them over this coming weekend. So if you want me to check yours, please have it in by Friday. Well, tomorrow is Friday, so try to have it in by tomorrow morning. ICE task 2 is activity 2.2.1. This is question 2 of your assignment. Please try to get that done as well. I know I have already shared with you a suggested model answer that was done many years ago by, I don't even know who did it, but they shared it with me. It was most likely a lecturer, or it could have been a student. And I have just since then kept sharing it from time to time so everybody can get a feel for it. It was checked by someone else that works with these things a lot, and they okayed it. Then we move on to ICE task 3, which is your activity 3.2.1. Please take note that there is actually, there's a 3 point, now let me just check if I'm making a mistake now. Yes. So activity ICE task 3 is in Learning Unit 3. But ICE task 4, I went and looked at it again, and there are 2 activities you can choose from. You can either do 4.2.1 or you can do 4.2.2. So when you submit it, you just need to indicate to me which one you're submitting. In case you guys forget, please don't do it within the learning units. When you open the module, click on assessments on the yellowy orange ribbon at the top, and there you will find your ICE tasks. So please submit them there rather than within the learning units. The reason for it is they've discovered that when you do it within the learning units, it's possible for people to download your work. If you do it under assessments, no one can view your work or download it. So that's just an explanation for why things are the way it is. Okay, so next we're going to move on to Learning Unit 2, which basically, okay, sorry, I see Stephanie's got a hand raised. Yes, Stephanie, go ahead. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
Hi, Yoranda, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Sorry, I just wanted to ask, you said not to submit them via the discussion tab thingamajig. Does that mean that we don't need to be commenting, obviously, because if we're not submitting it via the discussion tag, then we won't be able to comment on each other's work?
Correct. So there's no need to comment anymore on other people's work. It's just safer for us not to do that. Remember, this is a very new system, so we're not all 100% sure how everything works because it's our first semester using it, and for now that's the way we're going to do it.
Okay, so as long as we submit the actual work, we will get the mark whether or not we've made any comments.
Correct. I'm not going to check that you've actually, for my module, another lecturer might want you to do something differently, just so that you know for my module, I don't require you to do comments on other people's work.
Thank you so much.
Okay, I see someone has said, so what do we do if we have already done ICE tasks on the activity and commented You don't have, there's nothing wrong with it. I will just ask you to please still go and do it in the assessment section so that when I do the marking of the ICE tasks, I can see it there. From what I gather, the system is going to show me there's marking in the in the learning units, but there will also be then on the other side. So you're not doing wrong by doing it like that. You just need to be aware of the possibility that someone can download your work. So for safety's sake, just also upload it as I've explained under the assessment tab, and then you will be able to get your stuff all done. I'm sorry if that created extra work. Like I said, this is new, so we don't really have much to do with that. Okay. Let's move on to idealism versus realism. So this is your assignment. The second question of your assignment is based on that. I only touch on this very briefly to get you an idea of what's going on. There are some activities. I've got 47 slides to cover in 1 hour. I'm not always sure if it's going to do. I always prepare more work that I can leave out rather than have too little work to do. So let's go on. Theme 1 then deals with our 3 legendary figures. The first one we have is Socrates, and basically he is regarded as the father of, take note, Western philosophy, not all philosophy. He's very well known for his Socratic methods, where we help people to discover knowledge by asking questions. So instead of me telling you what the answer is, I guide you to the answer by posing more types of questions. So he believed that knowledge is a virtue, that educated people will naturally be good. So he had this idea that critical thinking and questions are essential to learning. Now, it was quite interesting. I've had a discussion on what exactly is critical thinking just now with my family while we had supper, and I've had it with quite a few of my classes this week as well. So the purpose behind critical thinking is to not just accept everything at face value. If you think the old ways, parents, you ask your mother, why do you need to do it? So if you grew up in an Afrikaans home that I did, she will probably slap you and she will tell you because I say so. So that type of mentality suppresses critical thinking. The newer generations want to know why we've got to do things, not because they want to be difficult, they just want to understand it. If they understand it, they are more likely to abide by the rules if the rules make sense. If the rules don't make sense, they're not going to abide by it because critical thinking has already started. Stopping on this, just to go further, why do we not have many people that can use critical thinking? Because previous systems, not just in South Africa, worldwide, benefited from the public not having the ability to critically think or not being encouraged to do that, because then it means that you just followed whatever government told you to do. Think of politicians. How did they control their people? Because they simply told them a story and we then stuck to it and we abided by it. Now we're questioning them and we hold them accountable for things that they do. If you just go look currently what's going on in the world with this whole Trump and Zelensky situation, the whole world is saying, whoa, wait a bit, we don't agree with this. We are not going to accept this. And so that becomes really an interesting way of looking at things. So Socrates was our first person. He was the teacher of Plato. Take note, he never wrote anything down. All that we know about Socrates, we learned through the works of people like Plato that wrote down the teachings that they received from him. Our next person is Plato. So, as said, he was Socrates' student, and he introduced the theory of forms. He believed that true knowledge exists beyond the physical world, and that education should help students discover abstract truths. So, for those of you that's not into the languages, what exactly is abstract? So I teach my B.Ed students, the minute you see the word abstract, think of the concept love. What is love? It's very difficult to explain to people what love is. We know what it feels like, but it's not easy to explain. So he felt that we needed to work into abstract concepts. So one of his key ideas regarding education was that it should shape leaders and instill moral character. That's why we need to have education. And guys, although these people lived more than 2,000 years ago, the story is still that if we go look at their teachings, it's still relevant today. And what I do with my B.Ed students, because they do the same module that you do, they just have many more sessions with me because it's a face-to-face one. And what I'm trying to do when I teach them or when we cover a theory or philosophy, I try to say to them, what is this going to look like in the classroom? And they've already now started with learning unit 3 because their assignment 1 was due last night. So they've got different due dates from what you've got. And they can already start picking up every time we do a new philosophy. I'm going to ask them, what is this going to look like in the classroom? How are you going to change your teaching methods? And to me, when you start to understand that, then the purpose of this module is clear, because now you're going to understand that you are actually doing this module to help you understand different ways to teach the same theory. So you cover the same content, you just do it all in different ways. So to me, that is really what makes this cool. So who did Plato teach? He again was the teacher of Aristotle. And he founded the academy, which is regarded as like the first university that existed many years ago. The third person then is Aristotle. As we found out, Plato was his teacher, and he moved away from the other two. And he went more into, he's the dude for realism. So he looked at it and he said, but listen, let's look at the reality of the matter. So he believed that knowledge comes from observing and experience rather than abstract reasoning. So he categorized knowledge in 3 things: theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, and productive knowledge. You can see all the subjects that go along with that. So if we look at that, definitely a more rounded approach, moving away from just philosophy and language, but actually also looking at the realistic aspects of life. So his key idea regarding education is that it should be practical and it must be based on experience. The impact that he has had on teaching is that's the modern scientific education, the critical skills that go along with that. Interesting fact, he was the teacher of Alexander the Great. So his teachings influenced the leadership of such a prominent figure in our history. It helped with the military strategies, and then also he had quite a lot to say about how you should govern a country or people, and Alexander the Great incorporated quite a few of that in his work. So that takes care of the 3 legendary figures. Yes, Jan, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, I want to ask a question or maybe also just make a remark. But what I've always been wondering is we are standing in the Western philosophy. I understand that. But I had some contact with Korea. I stayed in Korea for a while. And at the university where I was working, there was an Institute of Confucian teaching and learning. And I've learned a lot from that. And Confucius lived in 551 to 479 BCE. So it's he was a little bit older than Socrates. So I always wondered why we don't really incorporate some of his thoughts also in the Western philosophies, because he was very much he criticized his social environment a lot, and he was ahead of his time. And things like, for example, being a lifelong learner. are ideas that he already entertained, and we also have a lot of that today. So I just wondered, in your experience, why don't we look more into the Eastern philosophies as well?
It's a good question. That's why the module, if we go look at what was the heading for it, we basically said specifically Western philosophy. So we specified it, knowing that that is basically the findings that we're going to have. So I don't know. I do agree that there are many amazing concepts from Eastern philosophy. A lot of our religions and things go hand in hand with that. And I feel if we do more of that, we would probably get a more balanced approach. I cannot really answer you specifically why we do it. So we focus on Europe. So after Western philosophy, we definitely move towards that. I think one of the possibilities could be language barriers, that the languages in those days, well, if we're talking about long ago, remember, people have been studying philosophy for many years. So I think that could be it. And I think a big part of it is institutional biases. If we think of anything in the West was very much ruled by religion many, many centuries ago. And Eastern religion would definitely clash, in my opinion, with what the old people used to believe the purpose of religion should be. So we also had very different approaches to knowledge. So Confucius, Buddha, all of those guys, they kind of like looked at it in a different way. And I think a lot of the Western people, because typically when we don't understand something, we belittle it. So we would label it as woo-woo type of magic. They don't really know. It's mysticism. It's not real factual. And to me, it's sad that that is the situation. But for the purposes of this module, unfortunately, I don't have a say in what is in the actual content. But from what I can pick up, that's the important thing. So I don't think I 100% answered your question, but at least I guided you sort of in that direction. If it was up to me, if I could write our syllabus, I would definitely include Eastern. After this, I would first go Western philosophy, then Eastern philosophy, and so forth, before we move on to the European ones, which is, to me, also the more modern ones.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
if I just can say just this, yeah, thank you, because I think it's worth just including that in the discussion, and that's I was just inquiring. It's more like let's discuss this a little bit more than that we need to change the syllabus or anything like that. So, but thank you. I think it is thought provoking to maybe just go and have a look at what he also said.
Yes, I see Joshua gave also his point there, and it's got validity. I think it makes sense. He says, I feel South Africa was a lot more influenced by the West due to colonialism. So there was not much Asian influence when our schooling systems were being established. So I was very fortunate a little while ago, I think it was last week, Wednesday, to attend a talk of Professor Jonathan Johansson, or Jonathan Jansen. So he's like one of the leaders in education in South Africa. And it was not philosophy, but he was talking about research and how we are so stuck on qualitative, quantitative research instead of, and that is where decolonization comes in. So the first time I heard decolonization, a lot of people say, oh, now we're going to get rid of maths and we're going to get rid of, and that was not at all what decolonization is about. Decolonization is saying, let's look at Africa. If we're going to do a study in Africa, does it really matter whether it's qualitative or quantitative? Can't we come up with a different type of strategy? And it was quite interesting that he had this wonderful talk that he shared his information, and he's actually going that way. He was saying it's time that we move past the old traditions that's always just been followed, because to me, that's often also what happens. We follow the traditions. We don't know why we're following it, but we might just follow it because that's what everybody else did before us. So I hope that answered your question. I am concerned that we're not going to be able to get through all our work because I just need to touch on a little bit more of the things. It doesn't mean I don't want to talk, but let's just see how far we go and then we can come back to it. So Sage says, do we ever get a chance to explore decolonization? Not in our classrooms because you guys are doing online. So when we do have, maybe in one of our sessions where we've covered most of the theory already, that could be a lovely discussions for us to have. I tend to have lots of discussions on these elements with my students, but take note, I see my students for philosophy, be it students 36 sessions. So I see them 3 hours a week. So I can definitely explore a lot more with them, unfortunately, than what I can discuss or explore with you. So Sage goes on, we explored this a lot in my undergrad and postgrad psychology degree and English degree at UCT. Decolonization is very important. Yes, and unfortunately, a lot of people have got a very negative view towards it, and I think it's because they don't actually understand what it's all about. So let's move on to theme 2 now. This is where we're now going to go into a discussion of what is idealism versus realism. So I just looked at some of the outcomes. I'm going to try to go through this quite fast because we've done activity 221 that guides you through it. So just to help you to understand what this all is, remember in Learning Unit 1, we learned about the branches of philosophy, and the 2 main branches that we focus on would be metaphysics and epistemology. So as you can see on the screen, I explained to you what they are with regards to idealism. I'm not going to read it to you. I think you are all capable of reading it. And then there's also a section of how does this actually apply in the classroom? So how are we going to do it in the classroom? And I think what's important here, I know I sent it on the WhatsApp group a couple of weekends ago. I asked ChatGPT to create for me a lesson plan, a demonstration of how in a lesson plan we use idealism and realism. So I assume most of you have now covered some aspects of SFTL, your module on teaching strategies. And typically your lesson would start off with idealism, where I would state a question to the learners. Let's say I'm going to, I've been thinking of foundation phase stuff all day. Now I've got to try to think high school. So let's say you're going to be teaching the children languages. So it's just going to be easier for me to do languages. Let's take something that's very practical, such as sentence structure. So typically, I would start with the question, why is it important for us to use correct sentence structure? What happens when we don't use it? Those are all philosophical questions. There's no definite answer for it. It's people's opinions. It's not actual practical work. So we can kind of guide them to the truth of what it is that we want to do. And this is where debating comes in so beautifully, where we can discuss what's going to happen if we don't have a sentence structure pattern to follow. So now we are philosophizing about it. Then we go into the practical aspect. The minute we go practical, we swap to realism. Now they practically do the sentences, they reconstruct them and they move them around or whatever it is that they need to do. At the end of the lesson, what do? In your conclusion, we wind up what we've done. We either mark or evaluate the realism aspect, with other words, the doing side of the lesson, and we go back into idealism. So class, do you now understand why this is important? Who of you found something specifically interesting? They share their opinion. So that last section can really be a mix between the two. But typically, lessons start with idealism, then we move to realism, and then we either do a mixture of it or we go back to idealism. So I just find that to be, if you start looking at it like that, instead of making it this really overly complicated stuff, you will cope better at it. Someone saying, do you want us to talk about our subject specifically when we explain this to be more precise? When it asks you, and I think it does ask you for examples, then yes, you need to use examples relevant to your subjects. Guys, I don't teach you your didactic modules. I understand most of the didactic except the math and accounting stuff. So if you can't think of an example in your subject, use any subject. It doesn't matter to me. I'm testing, do you understand idealism? Okay, so thank you. I see Jan is sharing a really nice article there. So those of you that's more interested in that, I'll definitely look at it afterwards. So this then covers idealism. Let's go look at realism. So metaphysics, epistemology, the key aspects of it. How does it apply in the classroom? So typically, this would be our science, maths, our practical subjects, where we learn by doing certain things. So example, teaching science by doing experiments of instead of just reading it. So the reality of the matter is a lot of schools in South Africa has science as a subject. I'm talking about physical science. And they don't have a lab where they can do chemical experiments and things like that. So those children need to learn what happens when you mix certain substances together to form something. They can't actually experience it. They've got to learn it by the book. So those that's learning it by the book are in the idealism part of it. Those that's fortunate enough to have a lab in which they do things are doing it the realism way. So that just gives you a nice summary of what it is. So there is a case study that I just want to touch on. I know we're early, but I'm not going to go through the answers with you. I do share the slides with you on ARC. For those of you that's interested, you can go more into that to understand kind of like what's going on. So what's happening here is we are using science as the subject, and we're going to look at how would you use the different approaches in a science lesson. We typically think science is going to be realism, but we can make use of the others. So they give us a scenario here of Miss Naidu teaches a grade 11 physical science class. In one lesson, she explains Newton's laws by discussing the underlying concepts and theories. And then in another lesson, she makes students perform experiments to see the laws in action. So that would be the realism. Some learners find the discussion approach useful, while others only understand after conducting the experiments. So you've got 3 questions. How does Ms. Naidu's approach reflect both idealism and realism? Why might some learners prefer one over the other? And can teachers balance abstract knowledge and practical application? So the answers are on the next couple of slides. I'm not going to go through the answers with you, but I wanted to point out to you here, this is why you are doing philosophy, this module. Because what is the module's name? The module is not called philosophy. The module is called Foundations of Education. So why do we have to cover these things? Because if you understand that we can teach the same content in different ways, I prepare you for I prepare you to be a better teacher to your learners that you're going to have, because you are going to approach things in different ways. We go look under the scenario, that last bullet is so typical. What happens? Some learners find one approach good, the others are going to like the other one. If you only ever do one, you are doing a disservice to your learners, because there are going to be some of them that cannot learn the way you teach. I'm sorry if I'm standing on toes here with my maths teachers, but to me, that is often the case. What happens in maths? You get some maths teachers that can convey the knowledge in a certain way, and some of the children understand that. The children that struggle to understand it the way the teacher's explaining it will be lost. Maths, which is a very important subject, will be lost to them unless they go for extra lessons. So that is why we go through it. So there are possible answers. I'm not going to go through the possible answers with you now, though, because I am worried that we're going to get stuck for time. So the next big thing that we're going to look at then, how do these philosophies work in teaching practice? And this is a big part of one of the sections of question 2. So if we then go look, what is the influence of idealism on teaching? It encourages, both sets encourage critical thinking, but idealism also wants to have debates and conceptual learning. You still have to learn the concept. We can't just do critical thinking about everything, because some aspects we can't do critical thinking about. It is what it is, and that's the reality of it. So it's typically used in subjects such as your languages, where we've got literature. It would be in philosophy. It could also be in ethics, which would typically be in your life orientation modules. It could also be life sciences as a subject. Even in science, when is it okay to experiment on people or not? So those of you that studied psychology, I think it becomes very interesting when we start touching on all of these things. So they tend to have a learner-centered approach. The teacher acts as the guide to help the learners understand whatever it is that they're learning. Example, in life orientation, students debate moral dilemmas rather than just memorizing ethical theories. When is abortion okay? When is it not okay? You will find when you guys do your teaching experience, I presume most of you are doing it next semester, unless you're going over 2 years, then you might do it a bit later. Especially teenagers, they like it when you are open to challenge the status quo, when you are willing to question why do things work out in a certain way. They don't want us just to go with whatever is in the syllabus. They like it when you say to them, but why are we doing it like this? If we could do it differently, how would we do it differently? And often that is when I play devil's advocate in my class, and I actually help them to understand that they can't do everything the same way. Okay, so the summary writing in life orientation is realism because it measures and quantitative. It depends. No, I don't agree with you. I don't feel that it is realism because it could be totally idealism. It's going to totally depend on how they are going to structure their essay and what point of view they're going to take in. It's the same with any type of study that you're going to do. Are we going to do qualitative or quantitative? It all depends on what's the purpose of the essay or the purpose of the study. So let's then move on to realism. Realism's influence on teaching practice in the 21st century. Again, we've got practical application, much more a hands-on learning and factual knowledge. So although maths and science typically form part of that, it is not always possible for us to do all hands-on learning within maths and science. Some of the stuff, they must just accept that that's the way it is. And that is when we move into more the idealism side of it. So, but typically the dominant subjects would be science, maths, and technology in today's world, because tech is now a new big thing. It's a teacher-centered philosophy, more so than the other one. The teachers deliver the structure, the factual. We guide the students to do the experiments and discover for themselves what's going on. Example, in a physical science class, learners conduct experiments to verify Newton's law rather than just discussing them. So there you have it. Typically, we would have a blended approach. Example, a history teacher first presents the theory knowledge. So that would be the idealism about, let's say, World War II. And then she could go and use primary sources and documents. It could be many different. I'm not a history teacher, so I would not know what type of documents they could use, but I would imagine maybe extracts from diaries, maps, things like that, which then it will help them, give them a map, figure out where was it. Can we actually see how Germany infiltrated the different countries? Let's draw a timeline. Let's see on a map how they grew or how certain countries shrunk. Now we're moving into the realism. And typically we would not consider history to be a subject that we can have realism in. It's all going to depend on how you are going to spin it. Again, I've got a case study for you. This one is looking at the impact of idealism and realism on teaching practice. So there's a story. I am not going to have a time to do this with you guys. If we finish earlier with the assignment discussion, then we can get back into this. So again, there's your case study, and then there are some possible answers for you to also use in this thing. Now I'm moving on to the actual assignment. I am concerned when I was on ARC earlier, I saw that some students have already submitted their tasks. And this now is going to be the first time I actually officially discuss it with you. Yes, I shared the WhatsApp, not the WhatsApp, the YouTube link with you, so that those of you that wanted to work can start working on it. I have discussed it with management. I have closed the link for assignment 2, and that link will only be opened after we've actually done the discussion. I don't think the links should have been opened by now because it causes real confusion. Okay, so someone's asking, can we please share the WhatsApp group link? And I ask one of you guys to maybe, I don't know who's our admin person, to just copy the link and paste it so that we can join. Okay, guys, so let's go through the assignment step by step now. Thanks, Jess. Such a nice person. I know I can always count on you. Let's get started. Question 1 deals with personal philosophy of education. So this is a summary of the YouTube that I made. You've got to write an academic essay, 1,000 words. Please take note, based on discussions that all lecturers that teach this module we've decided to allow a 10% extra. So you can go up to 1,100. What is in your word count? So in a Word document, you can literally highlight it, and in the bottom left, it will tell you what the word count is. So get that word count, and then you subtract all your headings and your references, the stuff in brackets, like Smith 2021. Those do not form part of your word count. So just so that you've got that, okay. Explain the concept of the philosophy of education and its importance. State your own philosophy and align it with the purpose of education. Critically discuss how your personal philosophy will shape the classrooms of the future, and then discuss the relationship between epistemology, metaphysics, and education. So it starts off with, luckily, they break it down for you very, very specific. Jess, I think it looked like it worked. If we could just see if that worked, hopefully it did. So let's go into it step by step. So the first one is explain the concept of philosophy of education and its importance. Go look at the rubric. It's very clear what you need to do. You've got to give me a clear definition. What is philosophy of education? Some people are first going to explain to me philosophy, then they're going to explain education. That's fine. Ultimately, I want to know, or I am testing whether you have got a good grasp of what is philosophy of education. So that is what you're going to start off with. You can go and look at the historical and theoretical foundations of philosophy, explain how philosophy of education then influence curriculum and so forth. Very straightforward. That is what you need to do. Key aspects that you would consider when you answer this would be, what educational philosophy do you think is the most important for modern teaching? And that is going to depend on your subject that you're going to teach. To me, my philosophies change depending on what I'm teaching. If I'm going to be teaching my first year's Afrikaans additional language, I go into a much more practical thing where my philosophy in that class is going to be, I want the children, or in this case, the students, the first year students, to demonstrate the understanding of language structures by being able to change it based on whatever instructions I have. That would not be my philosophy in my research module that I teach my students. In the research module, I need them to be able to understand, when do I use quantitative versus when do I use qualitative? Why do I use the one and not the other? What will suit their purposes better? So again, you kind of tweak it based on what it is. I'm talking about your personal philosophy here. So why should teachers understand their own philosophy of education? It is really, really important that you gain a solid understanding of, what do you believe? Because guys, when you go for an interview, it's one of the first questions they're going to ask you. What are your thoughts on education? Meaning, what's your philosophy? What's the role of the learner? What's the role of the teacher? How do you break the syllabus up? How do you believe children should study or learn concepts? That all is part of your personal philosophy. So that is what question 1.1 is about. It's for 10 marks. Then we move on to question 1.2, that state and explain your personal philosophy of education. So now, in the first bit, you first just told me why philosophy of education is important. Now you're giving me your philosophy of education. You could align it with idealism or realism. It could be a combination, whatever you feel works well. What is the purpose of education according to your personal philosophy? What teaching methods best align with what it is that you do? Again, in my language modules, my teaching philosophy would be hands-on. In my research module, how are they going to do hands-on? They don't know anything about research. This is the first semester that they do research. So that's going to be very theory-based. And I've got to try to give them lots of examples. And now they're starting to understand it. And then next semester, they actually create a research proposal. Now we're moving into realism. So that is kind of what you've got to focus on here. Tell me your personal philosophy. How does it align? What methods do you believe in? What do you feel is the role of the teacher? What do you think is the role of the learner? Next, we move on to the critical discussion of your philosophy, how you feel it's going to shape the future. Now, why is this being asked? Guys, I'm 52, so I probably have about another 13 years and then I'm going to retire. You guys have got another 30, 40 years within the teaching world ahead of you. So if we can get you to understand how you can impact the future of our country, wherever you are, of the people that you interact with, then we are being successful. And that's the purpose of this section. So here you are describing to me, how will the methods or your philosophy that you've decided, how is that going to help you or help the people in the 21st century to work? Hopefully you are for critical thinking, that you want to encourage all of this. And then we're also going to look at how can educational philosophy address diverse learning needs. So as you guys know, inclusive education is like my passion. What can we do to be more inclusive? Or if you're a maths and a science teacher, how are you going to affect the 21st or people in the future? I would imagine you want to be a great maths teacher so that children that go through your classes can choose the careers that require a good maths and science mark. And you're giving them that opportunity, which means they can build the future that they want. I see there's another question. Do you want us to go deep into teaching methods per subject in the first essay, or can we? No, you have to talk about it general. The minute you go deep, your word count's going to go over. We're not busy with a discussion on teaching methods. We are busy here with what you feel would be good teaching methods to use. So what you need to address is, how will teaching methods adapt in the 21st century? Specifically, your methods. What role will critical thinking, creativity, and innovation play in the classrooms? How can educational philosophy address diverse learning needs? And that takes care of question 1.3. So I have shared with you. In case I haven't, let me just go and grab it. And now it does not allow me to share. This is now brand new. Normally I can share it. Guys, if I haven't, if someone, Jess, if you can just remind me, I will share with you the slides that I use with my B.Ed students. It's the same slides that's in the video. I actually, at the end of each question, give you like a template with headings that you don't have to use, but that you can use. Please take note, if you do not make use of headings and subheadings, you will lose marks. Go look at your rubric. It actually specifies the use of that. I know you guys are postgrads, but lots of times students have got this bizarre idea that academic essays don't have headings. If you got, what is the ultimate academic work? It will be a thesis, be it for master's or PhD. And guess what? They have headings. So that is why headings are part of what it is that you need to do. We now, okay, we're not done yet. Sorry. Yes, Jan, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be short. I know the time is short. I just see that at the bottom of my screen, it says presenter has turned off participant navigation. And I think that also has to do with the sharing of the presentation. So you don't need to do it now,
I've
but
got no idea
maybe
how I see it. Let's go
later on.
settings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you
Okay, we've
turn
got
that on,
okay,
it might
cool.
help.
I've got an amazing tech person at our campus. I will definitely help them to do that. Jess, if you could remind me, straight after the meeting, because my WhatsApp is open, then I can just go. I just don't want to do it right now because we pushed for time. So question 1 is not totally finished. When you finish discussing 21st century teaching, you now have to link your philosophy with epistemology and metaphysics. And to do that, you first have to give me a definition of what each of them are. Then you have to explain how your philosophy of education will be shaped by these concepts. What is epistemology again? How we learn, how we get to understand. What is metaphysics? The reality of something. So you got to play around with that. I did share with you 2 examples that will guide you. Guys, the examples that I share with you, I do with the permission of whoever's work it previously was. So that would be based on last year's students. It means that the referencing style is not the one that we are going to use now. And it also does not mean that those essays are 100% perfect. You also cannot use the information in it because the similarity report will pick it up. So the purpose behind that is just to show you how it all blends together. When I did my coursework for my master's degree, I really struggled, because that was also online, to figure out what exactly my lecturers wanted from me. When they gave me an example, I felt like, okay, I can use this as a pattern for me to do my work on. And that is why I do share these examples with you. So in the last little section, then, you are looking at epistemology and metaphysics. How do these 2 concepts fit in with what it is that you do? We now move on to question 2, which is based on idealism versus realism in education. So you've got to write a researched academic essay comparing idealism and realism. Discuss the originators. Oh, someone's only coming into our class now. Discuss the originators, explain how epistemology and metaphysics relate to these philosophies, and then critically analyze how idealism and realism will apply in the 21st century. Because ultimately, we want to see that we still do this in the classroom. So if I had enough time in today's session and I didn't want to still discuss the assignment with you, we would have been able to do the case studies. When we do the case studies, we now move on to a mixture of the 2. And a question discussion would be idealism, multiple choice question, or whatever. An essay based on will be idealism, doing a project in the real world. Okay, we don't touch pragmatism at all. You guys are not allowed to use that word at all in your essay, because that's not what we are focusing on. At this stage of the game, we are only focusing on 2 philosophies, idealism and realism. I know question 1 had those pictures of the dead guys, as I refer to them, that you needed to ask about. That's fine. Still, when you touch about that, you don't discuss pragmatism. You're simply just going to say how to do all the things together. Okay, Jess is saying, okay, Jess is answering the other question. Let's move on. And then when we've got time left, I can see if I can answer more of your questions. So question 2.1 is a split of a discussion on the philosophers and their key principles. Now, we've already told you who were the dudes that were the key. So although in this table, I've only said Plato, we know that Socrates and Plato together were the key philosophers for idealism. If you go look on online sources, they will give you other people as well. What we are focusing on are in Learning Unit 2. What was the first theme? The 3 great figures in Western philosophy. Those are the people we need to focus on. So as you can see on the table, I just created for you briefly to show you Who are the philosophers? What were the core beliefs? And what was the impact on education? So what is it that you need to do in this aspect? Explain how these philosophies influenced education, educational thought. What is education? How should education be done? Things like that. So discuss how Plato and Aristotle's views impact teaching, learning, and the curriculum development. So if we go look at our CAPS document, why was CAPS introduced? So apartheid came to an end. With other words, the old NCS, the National Curriculum Statement, had to change. And what they did, they then brought in outcomes-based education. What happened with that? It didn't quite work out, but we still do it. At the start of each lesson, I tell you what the learning outcomes are going to be. And now that's what we do in CAPS. What's the purpose behind CAPS? CAPS, if you go look at the discussion on CAPS, it wants us as teachers to motivate, to push for critical thinking, which is in line with realism. So there you can see already how that shift has taken place. In question 2.2, you then compare the epistemological and the metaphysical foundations with regards to idealism and realism. So there I've told you basically what it is, but you can't reference my slides. You've got to go and do the study. So idealism is based that knowledge is gained through thinking, reasoning, and abstract ideas, where realism says knowledge is gained through experience, observation, and experimentation. Next, we're going to go through metaphysics. Idealists focus on the reality that exists beyond the physical perception. And then realists say that reality is tangible, observable. That's where the whole concept of the falling tree comes into the picture. Guys, I see there are quite a few things going on in the chat. I'll look at the chat once I'm finished with the slides, just to ensure that everybody gets what they needed to do. I've only got 2 more slides to go. The next aspect then deals with critical analysis of idealism and realism in 21st century teaching. So now you are going to discuss for me, how will these two philosophies look like we are currently in the 21st century. So in today's classes, how will they look? What typically would be in different subjects? So typically in a business studies one, we would go more idealism, but we can use realism. And that is now when the fun discussion actually starts, where you start ideally identifying that for your subject, whatever your subject is, you could use both. That's ultimately the goal of this, is for you to understand that you could use both. So what do you need to discuss? You need to tell me how idealism shapes educational policies, curriculum, and so forth, and how would realism ensure that there's practical learning that takes place. How can teachers use a balanced approach? Because ultimately that's what we want you to see, that there is a balanced approach to all of that. So just a final summary with regards to this essay. Please take note, as I've now said, you must use headings and subheadings. Your academic writing is essential. You need to do this correctly. You need to do it professionally. Your referencing must be accurate. You guys have now had training on Anglia, and please remember this Monday coming, the 17th, at 7 o'clock in the afternoon or in the evening, we are very privileged. Estia Kriya, who is one of our lead information specialists, is actually going to spend 20 minutes with us in our class just to recap Anglia for us in detail. And then we've got our question and answer session where you can ask me for further questions on it. For those of you that struggle with academic writing, and I'm not saying if you did maths and science or if you did a BCom or a BSc, but I would assume those students are not as familiar with academic writing because they didn't have to do so many essays like those that may be a BA in psychology or English or something like that. So I am happy to do a quick touch up on academic writing. And once ST is finished, I can also clarify some of the reference questions that you might have. So referencing must be accurate. Guys, I am strict on referencing. You need to reference correctly. I'm not talking about the commas and the spaces and the what. I understand we're still in the learning curve. So your reference list, I would imagine, unless you're an expert in this stuff, there might be here and there an error. That's not what the focus is on. To me, what is important is when you make an academic statement, that you back it up with words. So I've already done it for you in your WhatsApp groups. I sent you 2 paragraphs that another student from another campus sent me, and I shared with you my voice notes in which I explained to that student, okay, so you telling me idealism is, so that's now how I teach my younger students. I say to them, the minute you tell me something is, idealism is, epistemology is, I want to know, where did you find that information? So you need to reference it. That's where students go wrong with philosophy, because they want to, you can give me your own ideas on it, but the minute you're telling me this idea is in line with idealism, because now you've got to tell me, why do you say it's in line with idealism? When you give me those facts, we are now moving into what is, and therefore you need to give me a reference. Caitlin, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to find some clarity on that because I want to avoid repetition. So if I say, I believe experience is necessary for people to learn, then I put a full stop. Then I put an article that explains why experience is necessary. Is that fine, or does it need to be integrated together so it doesn't come off as repetitive?
Well, if you say to me, I believe whatever, you don't have to reference that because that's your belief. But the minute you say to me, when children use language outside their reference frame, they struggle with understanding. That is an academic statement. Where did you read up about that? In what modules? You guys remember?
So it's a physical example.
Yes. So you can use your other textbooks as references. You can use your SFTL textbooks when you discuss your teaching methods, if you're talking about a specific one. So you need to engage. Number 4, you need to engage critically with idealism and realism. What does that mean? You can't simply, so Afrikaans has got this lovely word, 'n blokkies kombers, which is, for those of you that don't understand Afrikaans, the grannies knit those little squares, and then they put those little squares together to give you a blankie. Okay, so when you're just saying to me, this source says that source says that source says that, you are now giving me a blokkies kombers, because you're not giving me your own opinion. Although you need to be factual, I'm interested in your opinion on these facts that you're giving me. And that is why you need to back it up. Go look at, I tried to use examples, the 2 examples that I shared with you that actually do that type of thing correctly. More so than the actual facts, but more do they do the referencing go wrong. So like I said in point number 5, you need to go beyond the definitions. You need to give practical applications and critical analysis. One of our students asked earlier, the bit that I saw in the chat, about examples. When you give me an example of something in the classroom, if we think of Bloom's, you are automatically jumping into higher order thinking, because now you can apply theory to the classroom, which is application. Application is one of your higher order thinking patterns. So if you can do that. But guys, please watch your word count, that you don't go too far with that. Sometimes I think some of you want to go into too much detail instead of just sticking to what is actually being asked. Please also ensure that there is a logical flow that's going on, that your arguments are clear, well organized, and relevant to the topic. And that now brings us to the end of my slides. Okay, let me quickly see if I can actually answer some of the things that's in the chat where I stopped. Okay, so I'm really back. Okay, last read was Jess saying, I'm not personally sure about that one. It might be a great idea to pop Ms. Jo an email regarding this. Yes. Okay, not a problem. You can speak about, no, you can't speak about pragmatism at all. You shouldn't be speaking about pragmatism because at this stage, we're dealing with idealism and realism. In your summative assessment, you can talk about any of the ones that we covered. In assignment 2, we're going to focus just on pragmatism and care theory. So then you can go into those discussions. Okay, then let's see. Jessica, I believe Ms. Jo said that we are not to speak. There we go, just reiterating it. Thank you very much. Critical thinking can be allowed in line with idealism. It just depends on how you're going to do it. So if I'm going to say to you, let's say I teach you a history lesson, and I'm saying, because history is not my subject, and I say to you, what would happen if World War III breaks out? Okay, so we would imagine that's an idealism question because we are debating certain things, but we can also be realistic with that critical thinking. We now have got such other things that we can use to fight wars, to cause much bigger chaos. That would then be realism. So critical thinking does not just align with the one. It can also be in either one of them. It's just going to be depending on how you structure it. Tiffany says, will these slides be uploaded? Yes, they will. I will actually attach them for you guys on the WhatsApp group as well to make it easy, but I will upload them on ARC. Jess then says, critical thinking is aligned with realism because both, yes, 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 correct. She's answering that. Okay, that's sorted out. Tiffany says, where could we find resources for the new Harvard referencing? Okay, Jess, please remind me if I don't do it. I have shared it with you guys many times, but I'm happy to share it on the WhatsApp group again. So Elizabeth is asking, so the essential part is that critical thinking requires evidence-based reasoning. Correct. Jess says they are on ARC. Yes, that's answering it. Can anyone else could suggest something that worked well for me for my questions? Okay, so she's giving them answers. And again, Simone is saying, if 2 or 3 lines are taken from the same source, do we reference after each sentence or at the end of the last line? You would do it at the end of the thing. You could even start off with, let's say you want to, I'm going to just make up something. Okay, it's not a fact. I'm making it up as I'm going along. Idealism claims that children need to use red crayons. Give me a reference for it. And now you are elaborating on what you've just said about red crayons, for argument's sake. You don't have to reference it further. If you, however, tell me idealism says red crayons, but realism says blue crayons, I prefer to have a mixture of the two, which means I'm going to end up with green crayons. Now you've given me a reference of the one and of the other, plus you've given me your own idea. ChatGPT is AI. Yes, that's what it is. Please, guys, remember, when you don't get an AI report, I do. So when I start marking, it tells me the similar, or it tells me AI, it highlights AI things for me. And that is why I'm not saying don't use AI. You can definitely use it to create ideas. But when it comes to supporting things, be very careful. I use ChatGPT every single day of my life. It sucks with referencing. It makes up stuff that don't exist. So be very careful not just to follow it. Another question, I have a credible source that shows how progressivism is rooted in pragmatism. That is why I want to talk about pragmatism. Yes, but you can only do that in assignment 2. You cannot do it in assignment 1. Candice is saying link to Anglia is also in the development task. Correct. You will also find it there. Okay, there we've got. Okay, so I think we have answered most of the things. I'm going to stop the recording. Sorry for today's lesson not being that interactive, where we didn't get to discuss